This is your host and real estate coach, Rafael Cortez. You are listening to the REI Wholesaling Podcast, where every week I bring you the real-life case studies and strategies you need to level up your real estate wholesaling business. If you haven't done so yet, go to reiwholesaling.com. Again, that's reiwholesaling.com. Sign up and get free access to your Wholesaling 101 course. This free training teaches you step-by-step everything you need to close your next wholesale deal and start making big money now. Fam, what's up? Welcome back to the CEO Pulse Podcast, where you get the real, the raw, and the mind of entrepreneurship. Let's break it down with my friend Eric Brewer. We just saw each other over the weekend at another mastermind. It was incredible conversations, incredible crowd of people. It was the first time I got to meet you in person. I've heard a ton of things about you. You're in the real estate space. You started in real estate in 2006. Since then, you've done over 3,000 residential real estate deals in Pennsylvania and Maryland. You've done, purchase, renovation, direct to seller marketing, novations, turnkey rentals. I mean, everything under the sun when it comes to real estate strategies, right? Well, every time I have a conversation about novation specifically, it's and somebody who's actually doing deals out there, like the name Eric pops up, dude. So I'm very glad to have you on the show. I want to dive into the nuts and bolts on how you got started, how the whole process has kind of unveiled, and how the heck did you get to a number like that when it comes to deals and transactions over your career. Welcome to the show, brother.
Appreciate you for having me.
Yeah. So give us a rundown, man. You get started in 2006 in real estate. How does that happen?
So I spent some time in the automobile industry after serving in the U.S. Army. Came home from the U.S. Army and was a avionics communications repairman. And when I came home, there wasn't really a civilian application of that job. So I was scouring the newspaper looking for jobs. And so this would have been in like 97 roughly. Okay. And came across an ad that was at a large auto dealership in my hometown. Job sounded kind of cool. I didn't have any other prospects, so I set up an interview and got hired and ended up in the car business. Started at like an entry-level $7 an hour job and eventually worked my way up through service and then service manager and then sales and then finance manager and then sales manager. And eventually at the end of my career in the car business, I was a general manager with, 100 plus employees, and I was burned out. The car business can be very taxing on you. And just the nature of the, auto dealer to auto purchaser relationship is just very confrontational. Like people literally like prepare for war when they go to buy a car, right? It's like, they're just going to fight with the salesperson for an hour and a half and hopefully leave with a car.
I know I do. I mean, what I do is I'll shop around before I even make it over to the dealership. And then, okay, this is what I want. This is what I'm going to fight them on. And these are the terms. So when I show up, I have like this war chest strategy. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Already lined up. So
it's not most people do not enjoy buying a car, and the majority of people don't enjoy selling a car. It's just it's a thankless, job. And I think that's gotten a little bit better, and, dealerships have started to recognize the need for time off. But back then I was working 6 days a week, 12-hour days, and basically got to the point where I was about to have my first child and knew I couldn't be a good car guy and a good dad at the same time. And one of those had to go. So made the decision to be a good dad and got out of the automobile industry. Took about 90 days, just doing some soul searching and trying to figure out what would be my next move. And I had sold some cars and had some friends in like the mortgage business and real estate agents, and got some pretty good insight from them about what the day in the life looked like in those jobs, and decided to start my real estate career in lending. Because in my experience in the car business, one of the significant advantages we had is our understanding of finance. So, our dealership was really good at, like, back then leasing wasn't super popular. And we sort of pioneered in our area how you could utilize, short-term and long-term leases to get a low payment on an expensive car. So people would drive from hours away to come buy brand new Toyotas for us for $300 a month when they were $600 a month elsewhere, because we really understood leasing. We really understood special finance, bad credit, negative equity, like all of this stuff that contributes to whether or not you sell a car. We were really good at it. So I'm like, hey, if I'm going to get into real estate, I want to have a good fundamental understanding of finance. And so I interviewed at a couple, mortgage shops and ended up basically taking a job cold calling for a refi shop. That was my first job in real estate. And after doing that for about 6 months, my mentor from the car business had sold his auto dealership and was interested in getting into real estate, had done some due diligence about house flipping and wholesale. And he called me. He was like, hey, I understand you're out of the car business and dabbling in real estate. I have an idea about flipping houses and I'd like to talk to you about working together. We had lunch a couple days later, and I had a tremendous amount of respect for this guy. He literally taught me everything I knew about how to sell, how to market, how to manage people, how to be a man. And so I was like, yeah, I'm in. When do we start? And so that was February 2006. We started working together, and that's how I got into real estate.
February 2006. And the times were different. I mean, you went through, I mean, you got into it right before the stuff got
dicey.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So how did you now? I mean, you're going into this. You're tapping into. First off, you're tapping into a new industry, right?
Yeah.
And you mentioned soul searching. I think it's interesting how when we get to a point of I don't want to call it a rock bottom point, because it's not necessarily always rock bottom, right? But there's a degree of bottoming out emotionally and energetically a lot of times, right? I know that happened to me when I was in my mid-20s. You started doing some soul searching and break into this new industry right before things get dicey in 2007, 2008. How did you mitigate that? I mean, at that point you didn't have the experience you have now, right? So walk me through that process. I mean, you started doing deals. How many deals did you go through, or what kind of activity were you going through over the first couple of years before it got?
Yeah, I think it was so two things. I think I didn't have experience, and I think that's honestly, there's a level of experience that becomes dangerous where you become overconfident and you think you know too much.
Yeah,
and that experience can actually be a poison to your success. And I was nowhere near having the amount of experience I would need to be able to survive something like that was going to unfold in 07 and 08. I actually think what saved me was my severe lack of experience. I didn't know any different. So when you say, how do you survive?
Yeah,
that was just, I'd only been in the business for a year.
Yeah.
So to me, it wasn't a drastic change. I'd only spent 10, 12 months in the old market, 18 months max. Though I remember vividly getting 10, 12 phone calls about properties we had in escrow to go to settlement. And they're like, hey, sorry, our deal's, off. My buyer's going to send a release. I'm like, well, what happened? Like, was there an appraisal issue? Did they change? No. The bank's out of business.
Wow.
What do you,
excuse me, you mean? Come again?
Yeah. They've literally closed the doors. Everybody got fired yesterday. The building's shut down. There's a notice on the door that says, sorry, not sorry. I mean, not technically, but right. Yeah. What are you going to do? Literally, the world was falling apart. And we just started to figure out, well, what are we going to do? Let's get them back on the market. Let's work really hard to sell them. That particular moment in time, we got introduced to installment sales agreements because we had, say, 3 to 5 of these deals that fell apart. As we started to try and get them financing elsewhere, we found out they had, say, 600 plus credit scores, 5 to 15% down, and a decent amount of income. And a few of those people, we said, hey, would you pay me a slightly higher payment and give me 10% down? And the people would say yes. And we'd go to my bank and go, hey, would you give us, who have good credit? And by the way, my business partner at the time had a significant amount of assets. He sold a brand new Toyota franchise. He was sitting on some bank, right? So one of the biggest contributing factors to the market crashing back then was the lack of liquidity. My man was jammed full of liquidity.
Yeah.
So he could go to the bank and say, you give me the money I'll borrow it, and then I'm going to go lend it to someone else that doesn't have credit score and assets, and I'll borrow your money at 6%. And our average markup was we would sell it at 10 to 12%.
Yeah.
So we created, and flash forward 3.5 years later, we had over 130 installment sales agreements on the street.
Wow.
So in that little moment, one of the ways we pivoted is we filled a need in the market where you had people with, say, mid to lower credit scores with abnormally high down payments that couldn't qualify for conventional bank financing.
Yeah.
We would sell the property for full retail value. We obviously had equity in the deal. We were burring basically deals without knowing that we were burring them. And instead of renting them, we were putting installment sales agreements together.
Wow. Not that I want to get too much into the weeds or the details of it, but did you guys have any issues with the Dodd-Frank Act, or was it not a thing back then?
Nah. So that changed initially because we were doing, I think it was over 3 deals a year. You had to become a licensed bank. We became a licensed bank. It was called Hillside Financial LLC.
Oh,
so we became a licensed bank. Then they changed that, and then there was a small gap where each LLC can only originate 3, and then you had to, So bottom line is the one thing that because we originated, some of those we would get back 2 years later and resell on installment sales agreement. We had to show a reasonable amount of proof that they qualified to purchase the home and borrow the money. So when you really peel back the layers of Dodd-Frank and how that happened, it was predatory lending, right? So we had to show with certainty that there was a willingness and enough income to be able to pay, the payment that we'd asked. Never had an issue. I built all of that around, a real estate attorney that did a tremendous amount of scrutiny. I may have asked him to be on the operating documents for a licensed bank to ensure that he was looking out for our best interest. But we originated over probably 200 of those in about a 3 to 5 year window. Never an issue.
Wow.
So that was one thing that we did to pivot early on. And there was a couple other things that if you actually had cash, you could have absolutely slayed it in 2008, 9, 10, and 11. So I was very fortunate. It wasn't my money. It was his money, my labor.
But you had access to it. Yeah.
Yeah. And the difficult thing is like figuring out what ARVs were going to be, because for about a 3 year window, they were just down. They were just constantly falling. But we did okay. I think one of the things that really helped us is in the market where we are in Pennsylvania back then, the median sales price of a house was probably $125,000. We operated in that market, like, 80 to 150. And first time home buyers were the least impacted group of people by the economic, meltdown that we had. Like they didn't know the difference between the old interest rates and the new interest rates. They didn't know the difference between old values and new values. They just came walking in and were like, "Hey, I'd like to buy a house. I'm tired of renting."
Yeah.
And if they were pre-approved, they were ready to buy.
Yeah.
So I think those two things really helped us operating below the median sales price in that first time home buyer segment of the market and pivoting to installment sales agreements.
So besides installments, were you guys also building up a portfolio and buying acquisition properties, or did you just stick to the note?
So thanks for rubbing that in. I wish I would have kept some of the
because I kick myself in the ass.
Oh man. Yeah.
every day.
I
just
wish
thinking
I
about the
could
deals
go back and like choke slam myself, because there was 1 or 2 people in my network that I would sell rentals to occasionally, wholesale deals to. And he's like, "Man, why don't you keep any rentals? You guys flip everything." And I was like, "Dude, what, I want to keep that rental to cash flow $300 a month, you moron? I made 25 grand on that pig."
Yeah.
And now those guys 10 years ago that were buying up all these rentals from me, they've been, they live a slightly different lifestyle. They have the option to not work if they don't want to, and they got sometimes 100 plus assets that are chock full of equity. I mean, the prices I was paying for stuff back in 2008, 9, and 10 compared to right now,
you're looking at 10%. You're looking at, if you look at Maricopa County, property values back then were about 10% of what they are now. It's incredible. And I sold, I had another business and I sold that business, and I was sitting on cash for a while. and I didn't pull the trigger on that. I was just, wholesaling and kind of building up the rest of it. I did some flips here and there and that sort of thing, but I didn't make an emphasis of the whole buy and hold, thing, and really, focusing on the net worth as opposed to the cash flow, or not cash flow, but the fast money, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, I just didn't know what I didn't know.
And I think coming from the car
Yeah.
business, I didn't have any real estate background.
Yeah.
And what did you do in the car business? You bought a car for cheap at the auction, you reconditioned it, and you sold it.
Yep.
Like there's no buy and hold cars.
Yeah.
Right.
That's
So like
exactly what I did back in 2006, 7,
yeah.
and 8. I was going to car auctions and doing the same thing, repurposing.
Yeah. So like 50% of the installment sales agreements that I did ended up as rentals because the people would default, they couldn't refi, something changed in their life. And, they came back and like, hey, we got to walk away from the house. So, that was the beginning of my rental portfolio. There was a lot of those properties that I would get back in, that I originated in 09, 2010, 2012, the value actually went down.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm not going to sell this thing and lose 20, 30 grand. I'll just put a tenant in it.
Yeah.
Right. So like, it's one of the things I talk to people about the long-term value of real estate is I literally built a horrible rental portfolio by accident between 2009 and 2012. And then in like 2020, 2021, the beginning of 2022, some of those I had accelerated payments and paid off. Every one that I still had, I had tons of equity because I never touched them. I didn't even consider refining them. I would just, I was just chalking away. I didn't even pay attention to them because my primary business required so much of my time.
Yeah.
And I pocketed well over $2 million in cash between 2020 and 2022 from refinances of those rentals. And a few of them I sold at COVID because I panicked a little bit, but looking for, hey, how can I free up some quick cash in case this thing gets sideways? And I literally didn't do anything right other than just hold them for 10 to 14 years. I didn't buy them right. I over renovated them. I'm not an expert property manager. I certainly was in 2009. The only thing I did right was wait. I didn't do anything else right other than just hold them for 10 to 14 years. And that resulted in a $2 million tax-free cash windfall post-COVID before the rates started going up.
Wow. You mentioned, I mean, you're giving the time frame of 10 to 14 years. It's interesting to see that if you go back decades, back to the 80s, every 10 years on 10 years on 10 years, the property values are increasing. So we see this in between, right? We see drops and whatnot. But if you go, if you take it 10 years back, you'll see that the price point from then to now has increased. So longevity,
I think it's for the last 200 years, every 20 years without fail, they've doubled.
Yeah.
So I just actually hit that point where obviously 2008, 2009, because if you look at 05, 06, and 07, they went up, right? So I just happened to buy at the bottom. So I got my double within 14 years as opposed to 20.
Right. I mean, you were at a sweet spot. You had access to capital. We always talk about the who, not the how, right? Who can I partner up with? Who can I, compound my efforts with? Not necessarily how can I get, to that space by myself. One thing that you obviously had was, strong work ethic and the willingness to push forward, even though you didn't have all the answers. And I think a lot of times we get bogged down as entrepreneurs, right? We want to overthink things. We want to, wait until everything is ripe for action to take place instead of really moving forward and learning as you go. And if you partner up with somebody else who's got the experience or the cash or some, type of value that you don't necessarily have yet, your journey can be, that much faster. So fast forward, you started, obviously you went into, the financing space, made a lot of money there. You were rehabbing, you were doing wholesaling. Now, when did you start? I mean, because you're known as an authority when it comes to novations. A really good friend of mine, William Dennis. I mean, he just, he swears by the stuff that you've taught him. He's made a ton of cash with the strategies. He's doing real well. Shout out to Willie. And I mean, it's one thing that right now is coming kind of into the spotlight, right? The novation is kind of like the new sexy chick and the block and whatnot. But I mean, you've been doing it for a while. So how it sounds like everything in your background is creative, right? Right back from the car dealership days, you're talking about structuring deals in different, different ways. Does that play into the strategies that you used in real estate, you getting into it and then building up from that?
Yeah, I never thought about it that way, but I think it's a really good question. I think one of the things that really prompted us going back to the car business and learning finance was I had a super qualified buyer. They wanted so badly to buy a new 4Runner and they wouldn't move off of $400 a month. Mm-hmm. And everybody else would go, it's a $40,000 car. It can't be $400 a month. It's a $40,000 car. It can't be $400 a month. And I was like, under what circumstances would this car ever cost $400 a month?
Yeah.
And one was like, put half down. Well, no, I don't have that. Okay. Well, what if it took you 100 years to pay it off? I wouldn't care.
Yeah.
Interesting. What if you didn't own it and you drove it for 5 years? I don't care. I'd normally trade them every 3 to 5 years anyway. So what's it matter if it's paid off or not? Well, we have this lease program where you finance just the part, because if you think about an auto lease, I've explained this a few times, and it was like when you buy a car and finance it for 5 years, you take the entire purchase price of the car and you finance it over 5 years. With a lease, they figure out how much it depreciates in 5 years. Right. And then you have what left over is a residual. That means that's a projection from the leasing company about what the car would be worth in 5 years or 3 years or whatever the lease term is. And you only pay for the portion of the car that you use.
Yeah.
Doesn't that make good sense? Sure. Okay. Well, the payment for a 5-year lease on this vehicle is only $387 a month, including tax. The only down payment you need on a lease is your first payment. Okay, I'll do it. And we're like, holy smokes, a $380 payment, for a $45,000 vehicle.
Yeah.
So we started advertising those payments and people are like, I can get a 4Runner for $380 a month. Yeah. Under what terms? Well, it's a term of a lease, 5 years, you make 60 payments at the end. If you want to buy it out, it's 12.5. Okay, let's do it. So we became like the leasing kings. We were leasing and we're like, man, this really works. Let's go buy a bunch of BMWs. Let's go buy a bunch of, so Prowlers. We had PT Cruisers, all these Highlines. Yeah. And they went to the new car dealership and they were like showing them what it cost to buy and the payment was too high. And we were showing them that you could own the same car and lease it for 40% less. So, and then it happened with like,
at the end of the day, you're solving the same problem, right?
So I think I carried that over to real estate. And when people came to us with problems, it was like, well, how could if it did work, what would have to happen? And then if I could reasonably make that happen in an ethical and moral way, we would.
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of the way that I was brought up, maybe even before, my first real job in the military, but certainly in the car business, one thing we really did is tried to listen.
Yeah.
Give people what they want and then say, hey, in order to get what you want, here's what you have to do. And that happened with real estate. As we talk about novations, that was one of the things that really came about and how I discovered novations, because it's been around for 100 years. The old application was like I literally was just arguing with somebody on social media about it. And he's like, a novation's when you partner with the seller and you fix and flip the house and do this. And I'm like, well, yeah, that's one version of it. What I've been doing for 15 years is the wholesale application of novations, which doesn't require any renovations. It doesn't require any capital. And I'm certainly not partnering with the seller. I don't like that idea at all. So, yeah, I mean, that's how I discovered novations is I kept getting all these leads from people that had really nice homes that would sell it a little bit less than what it was worth, but it didn't work as a wholesale deal. It didn't work as a fix and flip. I didn't like the margins on a wholesale. And I just put my head down as like, under what terms would this work? And I stumbled across novations 15 years ago, and now I've done over 1,500 of them.
Can you break it down? I mean, can you give us maybe a quick crash course on the process of novations, how it works?
Yeah. So just to give you a slightly better backstory, one of the bigger things that I noticed when the market started to crash was that literally before the financial crisis, nobody used FHA financing when they made offers on my property. Mm-hmm. They didn't have to. There was all this subprime lending out there. There was 80-20 loans. There was no reason to use an FHA mortgage. As soon as the market started to crash, the only real available source of financing for most buyers was FHA financing.
Yeah.
So as a flipper, I had these people that were coming to make offers on my property, and the lender would say, hey, my customer's good to go. They're pre-approved, good credit, good income. but you can't write the contract for another 60 plus days because FHA requires deed seasoning, which means for anybody that's ever flipped a house, an FHA buyer can't write an offer on your property until you've owned it for 91 days.
Yep.
And then it takes, say, another 45 to 60 days to close after that. So in totality, you got to hold the property for 5 or 6 months. I was accustomed to buyer, I was accustomed to flipping these homes in 2 months. Yeah. So, and at this point, we're doing 150, 200 flips a year. If I had to hold every one of my properties for an extra 3 to 4 months, that causes a little bit of a liquidity crisis, right? Causes a cash flow problem. Yeah. So I started looking for a solution. And that's when my real estate attorney he said, well, if you don't record the deed when you buy it, it doesn't trigger seasoning. And I was like, okay, I'm not sure what to do with that. But I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Actually, shortly after 2008, Congress passed an FHA flip waiver, which got rid of the seasoning. So for about 2 years between 2008 and 2010, I didn't have to use novations. 2010, that flip waiver expired, and I was seeking a way to circumvent this FHA deed seasoning requirement. And I wasn't comfortable doing it on my fix and flips because, again, you'd have to keep the deed open. The seller's still the technical owner. And now I'm putting 25, 30, 40K into a property. I didn't like that at all.
Yeah.
But what I noticed is as I was doing direct to seller, I would come across properties where the people I took them through my entire process. I'd make them a wholesale offer of, 70% minus reno, and they'd say no. And a lot of times what would happen is I would refer them to a real estate agent I worked with, and the seller would say, hey, I'm not going below 150. My max allowable offer was, say, 120. Mm-hmm. I'd refer it to my agent, and they would go sell it for 179 in its current condition, and I'd get like a $1,500 referral check. And I was like, wait, they told me they'd take 150. He got him 180. Why didn't I get that 25K?
Yeah.
Right. And then now in the back of my mind, I'm like, I wonder if a novation would have worked there because I wouldn't have to record the deed. They told me they were okay if it took 60 to 90 days to get them paid. All I'd have to do is get permission from them for me to show it. And I'd probably have to tell them that I'm going to list it on the MLS because I don't want them getting real pissed off after they see it.
After they see a surprise marketing material on.
I just started saying to people, hey, I'm at 120, you're at 150. If you gave me permission to take this thing to the open market and try and find a retail buyer, and if you didn't mind closing in 60 to 90 days, I'd be willing to give you the 150. And somebody was like, okay, let's do it. And I took it to the open market. I listed it and I made 25K on a house that I was either throwing away or getting a $1,500 referral check from. Yeah. And I was like, I'm never going to send another real estate agent another referral again. I'm going to try and novate every single one of them.
Yeah.
So the best way I can describe my version of novations that I've been doing for 15 years is a wholesale style transaction. What do I mean by that? No cash, no reno. On properties that are generally in wholesale condition.
Yeah.
Decent, right? It's not a big time fixer upper. It's in decent condition. And I'm selling it to a retail owner occupant. Wholesale style transaction, wholesale style condition, selling to a retail owner occupant.
Yeah.
So what I want you to do, and where I see a lot of people's like eyes roll back in their head and go, how many people do I talk to on a monthly basis that fit that description? These are people that after you go through your offer, they're going, Raphael, this sounds really good, man, but I'm not going to give it away.
Yeah.
Raphael, you guys are awesome. Like, I'd love to make a deal. This all sounds super convenient. I love the speed of it. I'm just not in any hurry. Those should be like alarms that go off in your brain. And it's like, novate, 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 right? And we talk and I teach and I share all the time on social media about how to pivot from your cash offer, right, at the lower wholesale numbers to what a novation style offer would look like and how to disclose to them the two most important things, which is I need to have reasonable access and I need your permission to take it to the open market. If you can get those two things in agreement and documented from sellers, you can start taking all of these properties that you're passing on. By the way, out of 100 leads we generally see with investors, there's 10 really good wholesale opportunities in there. Mm-hmm. There's 50 or 60 long-term follow-up opportunities. These people are not close to making a decision. They want way too much money, whatever. They're not close to being a deal. And then there's 30 or 40 leads out of every 100 that have a nice house, that are reasonably motivated, flexible on terms, And those are the real novation opportunities. So there's actually 4 times more novation opportunities in everybody's funnel than there is actual wholesale deals. But we completely discard them because we're locked into this buy low, sell low. You can, because too many people chase discount, right?
Yeah. Yep.
What about just focusing on margin? Why aren't we in love with buying it so cheap and then turning around and selling it cheap?
Yeah.
If you knew someone, I would gladly pay 100% of ARV if I had a buyer that would pay 105.
105, yeah.
So stop chasing discount, focus more on margin. So when you pivot to margin, you go, a retail buyer would buy this house in its current condition for 200. If the seller tells me they'll take 174, there's $26,000 worth of spread. If I know I have a relationship with a real estate agent where it costs me 4% to sell it, which is what it costs me, that's 14. Well, there's a little bit of money left over there.
Yeah.
Right? So that's what
absolutely.
Novations allows you to do.
More than you would. I mean, you'd make otherwise. Yeah.
And then the thing that I talk about, right, is that the business of wholesale is generally trying to buy a needle in a haystack. Go out and find me a distressed seller that owns a house that's really messed up and they're willing to sell it for 40 cents on the dollar.
Yeah.
That's the needle. The haystack is all the other normal people out there that don't have houses that are falling down and don't have distress that would make them want to sell the most valuable asset they have for half of what it's worth.
Right.
Right. And then once you buy that needle in a haystack, I want you to go sell it to another needle in a different haystack. That's a cash buyer that's crazy enough to think that he can fix up a property and make money on it.
Yeah.
Why not buy the haystack? It's all the other homes out there that are reasonably priced, that are in pretty good condition, and sell it to the haystack, which is retail buyers shopping the MLS with their favorite realtor.
Yeah.
That's the business of novations. We operate in wholesale in a very small little corner, shady little gray area segment of the world, instead of operating at a bigger level where the bulk of the inventory is.
You make a really, really, really good point. I think, I mean, I've been doing wholesale since 2009, and the times back then were very different. I mean, you know that the competition, the offers were not, as common, and you still had to negotiate. I think more than anything else, introduce people to the idea of cash purchases and that sort of thing was a thing, right? Now everybody knows, everybody's heard of the cash offers and whatnot, but I think back then it was marginal, right? There wasn't such a big need to have multiple strategies, multiple negotiation strategies or tools on the belt to lock up the deals and monetize on the leads as they came in. As the time progresses and new things, pop up, I mean, it's important to have, the ability to move, right? To pivot. Yeah. I mean, you went, creative financing is a huge one, right? Now innovations is kicking in, but you can't be a one-trick pony anymore. Is what I'm trying to say, right? And this is a really good, I mean, it's a really good strategy. We used to do those back in the day, and this is when I was working for somebody as an acquisitions. So I used to be Sean Terry's acquisitions guy. And back then, I mean, we were doing a ton of deals. We did a bunch of innovations. We did, all that stuff was playing into it. And then when I stepped down, I went into my own business, and I went back to the wholesaling and creative financing, but I didn't tap back into innovations. It's just one of those things that it's kind of like use it or lose it, right?
Yeah.
But it's important to have that open perspective when it comes to deals. I love the fact that you're asking yourself, under what terms would this deal work?
Yeah,
that's such a powerful statement. It's such a powerful question, because it allows you to see multiple different perspectives from this one thing. You can't be a one-trick pony anymore. Yeah. Out of the 3,000 plus deals that you've done over your career, I mean, what do you? Give me just a ballpark ratio of like how many of those have been creatively put together.
Wow. So if you think about like installment sales agreements,
and outside of the standard, wholesale transaction,
more than half.
More than half.
Yeah. Just between novations. Because right now, month in, month out, novations are half of our volume. We just did a little over 400 deals last year. I'm expecting to do less, but better deals this year. And we should do 350 to 360 deals in 2023, and consistently 12 to 15 of those a month are novations.
Wow. And are you still operating just in Pennsylvania and Maryland,
So
or?
we currently operate in like central PA. So I'm about 45 minutes north of Baltimore. That's why I've done a bunch of transactions in Maryland, because we get overflow
Yeah.
from being in Baltimore. I'm about an hour and a half west of Philly, 20 minutes south of Harrisburg,
Mm-hmm.
and about 3.5 hours east of Pittsburgh. So I'm like literally right in the
Mm.
center of Pennsylvania, down in the southern portion. I'm right on the Maryland line. So
Yeah.
we've expanded into like the Philly suburbs. Some of the counties we were already in we would get overflow leads and traffic into some of the suburbs of the Philly market. So we decided, like, after about a year of getting accidental leads there, we're like, we might as well go. We have enough buyers and knowledge about the comps out there. So 3 months ago, we went into 6 counties in the suburbs of Philly.
Mm-hmm.
And about 90 days ago, we started doing some virtual stuff. So we're currently Q1 of this year. Our rock and priority was to get profitable on virtual and expansion. So we're wrapping that up right now.
And I want to ask you. I want to pick your brain on that. I want to ask you about the national, right? Because virtual is one of those things that I mean, it's conducive. It's actually something that you have to do if your market is not big enough and you're wholesaling, and you're trying to tap into all these opportunities out there. Going virtual is it's one of the key things. I mean, for the longest time, we've operated in Maricopa County alone. I would do JV deals with students and whatnot, but no. Every now and then we would open just campaigns in different markets like Tampa, Atlanta, and just different places like that, right? But not
Yeah.
intentionally gone or attempted to go into a national state level, and that's exactly where we're at. I think we just rolled this out too, and we're in Indianapolis. We tapped into Indianapolis as a choice. But right before we click record on this, and we're talking about some of the challenges, right? It's like, okay, cool. I mean, I was not expecting that to happen, or those bottlenecks. We're really good at locking up deals. The bottleneck that we're having is on the dispo side. Are you guys seeing the similar challenges, or
Yeah. So we
what's it
had
look like?
a relationship that came about through referral of a nationwide lead provider. And he's basically like, hey, I get these leads that don't sell.
Yeah.
And if they don't sell in the first 2 hours, generally they never sell. I'm looking for somebody to partner up with that I can sell these leads to or send these leads to for free, and then just kick me 25% or 30% on the back end when it closes. So
Yeah.
we're getting 350 nationwide leads a week.
Wow.
These are PPC leads.
Wow.
And so I'm like, oh my God, yeah, I'll take our lead management team. We'll put our acquisitions team in it. I'll assign someone to virtual. And like the first week, we got like 10 contracts.
Yeah.
Every single one of them fell apart.
Wow.
We had like 2 people that were fraud, like they didn't own the property. And like, I don't, and then we had a bunch of deals that looked like deals that once we got inspections, or, we got better clarity on the value from someone local, it was like, man, that's not a deal. I can't move that. And we finally got to the place now where we've changed virtually almost everything we do about in-person local appointments. I'm finding is almost 180 degrees of the best practice for virtual nationwide.
Yeah.
It's more about speed and taking the leads as they come in. Like the most desirable locations we get are Florida and Texas. Those are the 2 areas where we get the highest volume of leads, and also happens to be where there's the most cash buyers and retail activity.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a model now. When those leads come in, we prioritize based on motivation and location, who we call first. I don't do any of that in my local market. Everybody's a priority when the first lead comes in.
Yeah.
We fire off offers without much of a sales process. And really, we're just looking for high motivation people that'll say yes to a reasonable number. We don't even talk price in my local market until we've been at the house for 45 minutes to an hour, because we're really trying to build relationships, establish trust.
Right.
And then my real goal is, at the end of that sales process, I want to be able to make an extremely low offer and not get thrown out of the house. I don't have time to do that virtual. I've got 300 leads to communicate with.
Yeah.
So we're finally at the point now where we have probably a half dozen or so good contracts that we just got in, that we have a lot of confidence in our ability to be able to dispo. But that nationwide virtual model is a racket. Um,
It's a beast, man. It's a beast, a logistical beast, I think.
yes.
There's so many things that are different, right? When you're, well, price points, you're talking, you go national, you're gonna start to get leads that are not necessarily in the main market that you're tapping into. They're gonna be, 3 miles south,
Yeah.
and the price points are totally different, and so challenges like that happen, right? And then, but the opportunity is there, so you want to figure that out. Okay, like, how do we go about it? Do we just ignore it, or do we, actually try to do something with this thing? I think that's part of it, right? But also, as you're getting the marketing dialed in and the conversations dialed in, I mean, you start to see that the actual conversations are different. um there's a lot more pushback in certain markets in comparison to other markets. Why is that, right? Is it because just the buyer interest is not there? And I don't know, I think it's a process, right? When you roll out, I think you got to give it enough time for it to work, and see if it's a solid market. You can't figure that out within a
Yeah, and
couple
there's certain things about each market and the
yeah,
demographic of people that are selling there, and the demographic of buyers, and
yeah,
there it takes a certain amount of time to learn those differences, and then you got to figure out if you're willing and able to make the change
right,
to service that new market. So that's what we're in now. We've got 3 months worth of information. We realized everything we thought we did on the in-person model that was local doesn't work.
yeah,
Now we have 3 months worth of feedback. We're going to make some logistical changes we think make more sense based on the virtual nationwide model. And I mean, I'm giving it a year before I'll make a decision. And I don't, the biggest thing is I don't have any cost associated with lead gem. So
that's huge.
my only
That's
expense
huge.
is people and labor, which is not that much. I'm willing to invest a year's worth of that at 15 grand a month to figure out if it
Yeah,
works.
yeah.
So
Yeah, I mean, you also already have the engine in place. I mean, you have a pretty solid team, right?
mhm.
I was looking in your bio. What break that down? I mean, you 40 plus members.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I mean, you have a COO in place. You have
Mhm.
what does your team look like right now to be able to tap into,
So
the nationwide?
myself, as the CEO, I have a COO,
Mm-hmm.
everywhere from marketing, business development, which a lot of people would call lead management, acquisitions, dispo, construction, finance. I have a person in charge, a manager or a leader of that department. And then obviously inside of each of those departments, there's 5 to 7 people, right? We have
Right.
5 people that work in construction. We have 4 people inside of finance. We have in
When you say
dispositions.
construction, are you talking about your in-house crews for
Yeah,
flips,
yeah. We
recaps, and
do our projections are 60 fix and flips this year. So we cherry pick some of the best deals that we get.
yeah,
Honestly, one of the things we're going to talk about Thursday in our quarterly review, we are absolutely crushing right now in fix and flips. There's a
nice.
big inventory problem where we are here. So we're finding retail buyers are still paying high prices.
Yeah,
Wholesale buyers, cash buyers, landlords have scaled back. So every time I sell a wholesale deal right now, I'm leaving some money on the table. I don't know that I'm willing to continue to do that in these market conditions.
yeah.
So that's one of the things we'll talk about. But yeah, we do in-house construction.
Nice. I mean, it's a huge. I mean, that's a beast of an operation too. So you have, you obviously. I mean, you built that out since 2006. It doesn't happen overnight. You have, the track record when it comes to deals. You have the track record when it comes to the creativeness of putting deals together, right, and thinking outside the box. Add that to a really powerful network that you've been able to put together over the span of this whole thing. And I mean, you have a really solid recipe, right, for a business that can thrive and succeed, especially when you have strategies like novations and different things coming into it, and you're not that one trick pony when it comes
Yeah.
to the space.
I mean, we do wholesale. I still do some wholesale deals, like the
Mhm.
normal wholesale deal where I buy it, clean it
Yeah,
out, and resell it. Fix and flip, turnkey, novation, and I buy and hold some stuff. So we
yeah,
got, and as creative as I've been, I bought a lot of subject to stuff back in when I first got started because we were trying to preserve cash. It was more of like, hey, if I buy this, I don't have to use the cash that my partner was putting up. So if I could buy 2 sub 2s every month, that was another 2 deals I could buy off the MLS and pay full cash for.
Yeah.
But we're seeing a big opportunity now for us to get better at seller finance and sub 2 with these 2%, 3% interest rates that are out there.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, that's gold right now. I mean, I think it really is.
yeah.
So what's in store for you over the next, let's say, 2 to 3 years? I mean, and not necessarily just in the real estate space, because that's kind of hard to tell.
Yeah.
I mean, my strategy when it comes to real estate is keep doing what I'm doing right now and pivot as I as I need to.
Yeah.
It's do more but better. But what about the personal side? Are you? I mean, you are COO of the company. You have a big staff, and you guys are scaling and growing. I know you're a big family man. So it's what does that look like? Are you thinking of stepping away from it? Transitioning out of the business anytime over the next maybe 5 years, or and if so, what? I'm curious because I like to ask people about the plan, the exit strategy, if there is one, or how do we buy back the time is one of the biggest questions as entrepreneurs, right? So where are you at in that space?
Yeah. It's an interesting question. I've had this internal milestone of mine that probably started about 6 years ago to build a sellable real estate business. Now, whether or not I decide to sell it would be a different decision, because I think once you get to the point to where it's a sellable business, it's because
it's manageable.
Yeah. So once you get to that point and it's making a certain amount of money, it's like, well, why am I going to sell it? Right. So I'd like to create an opportunity for people in this organization to continue to level up. And at some point, right now, my COO doesn't have the ability to be a CEO as long as I occupy that seat. So, and as long as he sits in that seat, someone else in the organization doesn't have the ability to level up to a COO.
Right.
So I don't want to become the lid of the organization. So I believe, and I'm actively working on a situation where I could move out of the organizational chart. I would effectively just move into owner.
Yeah.
And allow someone else to be the CEO of this organization. And then I believe where I would spend my time would be the accumulation of long-term assets. I've been so transactional for the, goodness, I guess it's, 17 years now that I've been in this business.
Yeah.
And it's frustrating when I look back and, if I'd have kept 1,000 of those deals that I've done, we'd be having a much different conversation right now. Right. So that's what I want to do. I want to take what I know about leadership, take what I know about marketing, take what I know about construction, take what I know about acquisitions, take what I know about relationship building, and just point that at a bigger project, whether that's multifamily, commercial, trailer park, self-storage, education, something that because the one thing I like, as I've transitioned out of the day-to-day operations here, I spend about 25% of my time each week meeting new people. Like, I actually have my assistant schedule meetings for me to have breakfast and lunch with people that I either have an existing relationship with and I want to continue to nurture that, or someone I've never met before and I want to get to know them. I had a guy send me a $6 million self-storage facility today off market based on a lunch I had with him 2 weeks ago.
Wow.
Right. So, but I would never have the opportunity to do that. And I watch all the time, and depending on what your opinion is, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but people actually get aggravated when folks come to them and say, can I pick your brain? Can I take you to lunch? And I'm like, what happens if everybody that's saying that that's the wrong thing to do is wrong? What if I took those meetings? So I've been doing it for about 60 days now, where I'll literally go to breakfast or lunch with anybody that can type an email and communicate with my assistant and remember where we're supposed to meet. And it has not disappointed. Pretty interesting, actually.
I think, no, absolutely. I think it's the power of masterminding, right? I feel like we all have an X factor. When I started tapping into bigger groups and masterminds and whatnot, and got out of my egg, my bubble, right? When it came to my entrepreneur bubble, where I was the center of the universe, I started to see like, man, there's so much possibility out there. There's so many different ways of skinning the cat per se. And on that same token, different opportunities that, I mean, we don't know what we don't know. And the easiest way to find out, I think, about what that is having conversations, right? Seeing how people are doing similar things at different levels is I always get solutions to problems in my space from other places, other industries.
Yeah.
Just by having conversations. I mean, I think it's a very silly thing to stay closed off. But it's a very common practice when we're in the middle of the trenches, right? We don't have a time for meetings. We don't have, super zealous of time. But as the business, I feel, gets better and we start getting some of that time back, we can be a little bit more generous in the learning space.
Agreed.
So using it intentionally. Using it intentionally, like you're doing, right?
Yes.
So that's an amazing thing, man. Big fan of everything that you're doing. I mean, I knew you were a rock star. I didn't know how big of a rock star you were, honestly, until this conversation. So so thank you so much for
it's very nice of you
for the golden nuggets and the talk here. Before we sign off, I have this one question that I love asking everybody, and that's if you were walking down the street and you ran into your 17-year-old self, what would you tell that kid? What piece of advice would you give that young Eric?
The 17-year-old version of me was a knucklehead.
That's exactly why I go. That's exactly why I go back to 17.
I would probably smack the taste out of his mouth, knowing what I know now. Two things. I think. Can I choose two, or does it just need to be?
Yeah. Shoot, man.
Shut up.
This is the Eric show.
I would tell him to shut up
and
keep going. Those two things. You couldn't tell me anything when I was 17 years old. Literally, after being in the real estate business for 2 years, there's people telling me that I need to keep rentals.
Yeah.
I was not an avid learner until I reached the age of 40. There's a quote I read in a book, and I think it's multipliers. If you've never read the book, it talks about this principle of there's a segment of the populations that multipliers, and they get the most out of people, and then there's diminishers, and they actually take talented people and they diminish their impact. And in that book, it said there's a whole category of people out there that say that they have 10 years experience, but they actually only have 1 year of experience repeated 9 times. The only way you can say you have 10 years of experience, if there's a noticeable evolution, right, and an improvement over the course of 10 years. Yeah. And I think for like the first 15 years of my career, I literally was doing more deals, making more money, but all rooted in the same principles and beliefs that I had when I started. So I just wish I would have read more books and listened a little bit better. From the age of 17, but maybe I needed to go through that stuff in order to be so receptive to the things that I learn now. But I didn't touch a book from the time I graduated high school until I was 40. I got into reading. I mean, I don't know. I want to say maybe 8 years ago or so. Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, I think I was like 32 when I picked up the first book. And made it a habit from there. And I'm telling you, man, it's just, there's something about it, right? Like it's going through life and I don't know, I guess the best analogy is when you have a computer, that the computer can do a shit ton of things, but it doesn't have any programs in it. Like you can't do anything, right? So it's just the easiest way for me to get, wrap my head around that kind of stuff. The more you feed it, the stronger it gets. It's a muscle. It's just like everything else, right? Use it or lose it. You don't, I don't know, don't use your biceps. Like they're gonna go, skinny and scrawny and
exactly.
Same thing with our brain power. Same thing with curiosity. Same thing with creativity. Same thing with collaboration and networking and contribution. It's the same thing all around. So yeah, once again, man, I thank you for everything. The conversation has been phenomenal. Shut up and keep going. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. Straightforward. I like it. If somebody wants to get a hold of you, maybe pick your brain, sit down with you, somebody has an opportunity out there and they want to tee it up, where is the best? And before I jump into that, it's funny because this is the second conversation that pops up on storage facilities. I had one about storage yesterday. It's interesting. So I don't know. The universe sends us messages, I think. So, all right. Where's the best place to get a hold of you and find you?
Instagram, Eric_Brewer_invest. That's the best place to follow me. I talk a lot about novations and sales strategies and real estate. Give all that stuff away for free on a consistent basis, almost daily, sometimes 2 times a day on my Instagram.
Nice. Beautiful. Definitely capitalize on that. Follow Eric if you're not following him yet. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It's a must, man. And again, thank you so much for being on the show. I appreciate it. We'll make sure to have the handle here on the show notes, and I hope it was as fun for you as it was for me, man.
I had a great time. I appreciate you having me. It's a good question. The 17-year-old version of me threw me off.
My pleasure. I mean, it always does. I felt like I owned the world when I was 17, but that's just because I was a shithead.
Yeah, I didn't know any better.
And then life happens.
Yeah.
So yeah. Once again, brother, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure having you. Fam, thank you for listening. Every week I bring you the real, the raw, the mindset, the case studies, and the strategies you need to build your own successful real estate wholesaling business. So if you haven't done so yet, make sure to hit that subscribe button and don't miss out on real life experience and information that can make you millions. It's time to join the ranks of successful wholesalers and real estate entrepreneurs like the one you just heard, and take advantage of one of the biggest opportunities that we have in our lifetime to generate wealth. So go to reiwholesaling.com. Head over to my website, again, that's reiwholesaling.com, and learn how to make big profits, make big money by finding, negotiating, and closing wholesale deals from your own backyard. You've heard the stories, seen the case studies, stop thinking about it, it's time to write your own. Again, head over to reiwholesaling.com, click on coaching program, book a discovery call, have a conversation with my team, and you might get an invitation to join hundreds of students throughout the country who are leveling up on a daily basis. The writing is on the wall. Hustle is a season. It's not a business strategy. Take action, start building a sustainable and scalable real estate wholesaling business, and join the coaching program today. I will catch you guys on the next one. Talk to you soon. Stay focused. You got this.